we want to think of a parallel that would help someone who denies the very existence of white supremacy. What can we compare this to throughout history that they can grab hold to and see this is how they explain X, this is how they explain A to point Z. A being historical, whatever point in history, to Z being today. I mean, there are plenty of studies, there's plenty of fields of study, rather, that show the effects of history on today. And yet, when we talk about white supremacy and the overwhelming impact that 400 years of slavery, not just physical slavery, but emotional slavery and social political slavery and economic slavery has on the current generation, they just get like obtuse and say, oh, forget about that. That's the one thing. But the other thing I wanted to say, so I give everybody a chance to kind of think about that. But the other thing I want to say is that this permeates every aspect of our lives, right? I mentioned the beauty standards, just the way we look in the mirror, right? And how we perceive our hair and our skin. And it's because of the images that we've been told is beautiful. It permeates our economic lives because we are a direct result of the income that our parents had to give us and the wealth, rather, that our parents had to give us. It affects our politics. It affects our eating. It affects our neighborhoods. It affects everything. And yet it seems to be so disconnected from other people. Other people seem to be so disconnected from this reality that something historical has those type of lasting effects today. How do you communicate this to people? Not that we should be concerned about trying to educate them, but sometimes I just like to call BS, right? Because we know that what came before us has an impact on us today. So I'll just toss that out there to you two, as well as the chat room. How do you convey this to them in a way that they understand that these forces are still being felt today?
We don't look to the past. We only look forward.
And that's part of the problem, yes.
But what I will say is this. I'm sorry to echo. Okay, what I will say is this. That is why we are having this sort of discussion right now, is because one of the big hurdles to overcome is that people position racism as something that happened in the past. It was something that happened during slavery, during Jim Crow, during the 60s, before Obama. They keep sort of changing the metric by which they decide that, well, racism is over because I'm comparing now to a theoretically worse point in time. And because we're not there, we must be sort of post-racial. I'm sure people were claiming that we were post-racial right after the Civil Rights Act was passed. I'm sure people were claiming that we were post-racial right after slavery ended. I'm sure people were this narrative, this sort of cycle of, well, here's the new thing that is ending racism. It's just that, it's a cycle. But what I will, to address your first point, what I will say is this: what makes this American racism, modern Western culture racism, so hard to tackle is that it's largely impossible to draw those comparisons, because part of the racism we have now, part of the white supremacism that we have now, is meant to confuse the issue. Prior to this, people were like the caste system in India, for an example. People knew that they were there because of where they were born. People understood that they were there because of the situation they were born in, and there was no way for them to get out except to be reincarnated to a higher position due to good works they did in this life. But the insidious nature of the American white supremacist system is that it pretends like it's a merit-based one. It pretends that people are being based on their achievement and not based on the color of their skin. And so when you try to correct that myth, when you try to say, okay, well, how can you explain X, Y, and Z? They're able to, part of that conditioning is for them to say, well, then they must have deserved it. And that really perforates both every member of society. The idea that, well, I failed because I deserved it if you're black, or he failed because he deserved it, or he was shot because he must have deserved it, because our society is one that is merit-based. At least that's the myth. We have this sort of notion that America is the land of opportunity, and if you simply try hard, you can get ahead. That's part of the classist system. That's part of the sexist system. That's part of the racist system. That the reason people are below us is not because of the way they were born, but because they just simply deserve to be there.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is the language, right? So it seems like every era ends with some sort of rhetorical flourish. Like right now we're in the diversity slash color blindness era, right? So we've got some sort of tag we can apply to things to make them non-racist, or race doesn't impact these things, right? So if we say everybody should be colorblind, well, if we're blind to color, then we don't have to talk about race, right? So that conversation gets put on the back burner, right? Even though we need to have it, and it should be on the front burner based on the system we live in and our history as Americans. But we seem to have a way. We constantly have a way to explain away the differences in different communities, right? I had a discussion earlier this week with one of my conservative colleagues. Is that the language we use is very important, right? That it's not that black people are lazy. It's changed from black people are lazy. We don't work hard enough, or we haven't worked hard enough to succeed. So every generation we have this language change that kind of puts the conversation on the back burner.
And now, to add insult to injury, the language of the last 30 years has been not only are we lazy, but we're immoral. And the reason that we're not successful is because we don't have we need better Judeo-Christian values, right? So
like black folks
it's always a moving goalpost.
I mean, but that's been around since the beginning, right? I mean, that was one of the reasons why we had to go into Africa and get these slaves in the first place, because they were pagan. They were not pagans. Well, they were pagans. They were polytheists. They worshiped their ancestors. They prayed to trees and the leopard and all of these other things, and that made them deserving of what happened. So I mean, the standards have changed. Obviously, the justifications have changed to match whatever
but the tools,
whatever discourse is dominant at the time of the rationalization. But the underlying racism has not. The underlying mentality that these people there's something just inherently wrong with them. And it becomes, you have to really explain to people, listen, there is no such thing as American Black culture as something that is distinguishable or extricable from the larger white supremacist culture that exists within America.
Come on, man.
You cannot you can't explain the culture, whatever you want to call it, of the Black neighborhoods without really understanding the larger colonial mindset, the larger racist mindset that exists as the larger American culture. Like you can't, Black culture is simply, or rather, Black culture is a subset of American culture. It is the reaction to a specific population's place within the broad geographic area that you call America, in the sort of the philosophical that encompasses, for lack of a better term. So
let's drill down there, if you don't mind.